Welcome back to another episode of BSing Sports. Bill's here with me as most of the time, and I am here with him as most of the time. You might recognize my face. I'm Ryan. I'm the other half of BSing Sports. Today we're going to talk about, Claude Giroux, NHL All-Star Game, voted to his seventh All-Star Game, and was actually the captain of the Metropolitan Division, who took a 6-4 win over the Pacific today. What his future outlook looks like, and do we actually agree with the fact that it really gets to be his choice whether he leaves Philadelphia or not? We are going to cover some MLB news. We've heard conflicting rumors, as well as some key free agents might be pursued by some obvious or not so obvious teams. We might even talk about the Super Bowl a little bit. It's pretty important, as well as the Pro Bowl. I've seen clips and highlights and whatnot of the skills competitions, and some of that stuff was pretty cool. Actually, Russell Wilson killed it for the NFC. But Bill, we'll start with you. Why don't we talk about our man, the captain? Been in Philadelphia a long time, longest tenured Philadelphia athlete currently. What does his future outlook look like?
Yeah, I mean, as you already pointed out, he's the captain of the Metropolitan League here in the at the All-Star break. It's his seventh All-Star game appearance, obviously as a Flyer, since he spent his entire career here as a Flyer. As for what the future holds, you said in the opening there that it was basically his decision, that the GM had come out and said it was his decision whether he wanted to go anywhere or not, and I firmly believe that it is, in fact, his decision. I can't imagine any general manager giving up on a player like Claude Giroux. If he decides that he wants to finish out his career in Philadelphia, he's going to finish out his career in Philadelphia. Now, do I think he stays in Philly? No. And for what it's worth, he absolutely deserves to go and chase a cup somewhere else. Colorado is a really solid landing spot for him. The Avalanche have a really solid team out there, and I think he'd be a great piece and really help them push for the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, I've heard Toronto as well in those rumors. There's a couple places that he could definitely land, so he's the kind of guy that could take a team over the top. Nobody is going to hate having a power play specialist on their team, really, and that's what Claude Giroux has really thrived off of in his career.
John, I totally agree with you with that comment. In Philadelphia, for some reason, every time something goes wrong with this team, the Philly media, the Philly fans, for some reason, completely shut down on Claude Giroux, and I just don't understand it because he's been phenomenal every season he's been here.
Yeah, this is not a guy that he's very soft spoken. So in the Philadelphia media, that kind of looks beta in a way. It shows no leadership, whatever the case may be. If everybody isn't exactly like Bryce Harper and super outspoken, you're a terrible leader, and that may not be the case. Nobody's really behind the closed doors. Nobody really knows what's being said. And the players and coaches vote on the captain every year. So, I mean, while at this point, maybe it is a little bit of a formality to vote on the captain, I mean, they picked him for a reason, and he's been that way for a long time. So I can't imagine that his leadership skills are actually that subpar to where the players would keep voting him in the highest leadership position in the locker room. Now, I do believe that he does leave. I believe he deserves to leave. However, I'm curious as to how the fan base is going to react if he just up and says, yeah, I want to leave. You have half this fan base that has, like we've just talked about, really can't stand him for whatever the reason is. And they're going to look at it as he's quitting on a franchise that he blew up, essentially. They're always going to find a way to blame him. And then the other half is realistically going to look at it and be like, yeah, this guy's done a lot for us. He deserves to chase a cup. I'm curious as to what the return would be, considering he is a free agent in the offseason. So if he does go and get that cup in the offseason, he could very well return to Philadelphia, and they could have gotten a top prospect in terms of renting Claude Giroux out for half a year, which would be a win-win.
Absolutely. For the Flyers, that would be a win-win. And there's no reason that it couldn't happen. Again, Claude Giroux is not playing. He's not having an off year. And for the Flyers, who are struggling mightily, they've won 2 out of their last 10 games, so I guess that's actually good compared to where they've been the rest of the season.
Yeah, 13-game losing streak.
Yeah, they've been absolutely abysmal, but it's got nothing to do with Claude Giroux. He's doing everything he can. His plus-minus is only a -2 right now. I think I'm looking at it right now. -3.
Yeah, it got to be a team high.
Yeah, at -3, Claude Giroux is the team high. Our defense has been terrible. They've been super banged up. All the free agent acquisitions that we discussed many weeks ago have been relatively non-existent. Not even relatively, absolutely non-existent, because they've all been injured.
Ellis, Farabee, Broussard, who was playing really well before he went out. I mean, they're all hurt. Couturier's been hurt. Hayes has been hurt. That half the starting lineup's been hurt, for a majority of the season.
And for a guy with the name of
Ristolainen.
Thank you, Ristolainen, he refused to take a contract because he was betting on himself. That contract's looking smaller and smaller by the day. Now, it's not entirely on him. There's not many pieces around him. But he was betting on himself, and right now he's losing.
Yeah, I'd agree. He's not exactly having the best defensive season. That being said, I think it's time that these Carter Hart truthers step off the high horse a little bit and start to realize that Carter Hart's 2019 season may be a little bit, of an overreach. It may have been a bit of a Cinderella season. Carter Hart still has a lot of development to go through. A lot of these goals that he lets in are not the defense's fault as much as everybody wants it to be. We want this guy to be the next franchise goalie, and he has the potential to be. However, not every goal that goes in is the defense's fault. He's let in some very soft goals at times, and at times he's given up on himself. He's folded after a goal or two and let things pile on. So Carter Hart has a lot of work to do, just like the defense in front of him. And all in all, the team's not scoring goals either.
Yeah, and
that's really what it is. He's showing that he's 22, years old essentially, and that he's just mentally, maybe not all the way ready for the NHL. Maybe Ron Hextall was onto something by trying to keep this guy in the minor leagues.
Yeah, and he may very well have been. Hextall, essentially, not really lost his job because of a decision like this. The Hextall hiring wasn't phenomenal, but Hextall trying to keep Hart down was the last straw for the ownership here, and that's what cost him to lose his job. They've just been so bad that I haven't been able to watch. So I don't have a lot of information on the Flyers. I just looked up stats real quick, and the fact that the entire team is minus is just wow.
They're a bad team this year.
They are a bad team. And it's a shame because, like I said,
for one reason or another, they've had a lot of injuries, but at the same time, they're just a bad team. Like that's the way it is. They probably should go on a selling spree here at this point. However, the only upside to this is they're relatively young. You think about their best players. Ivan Provorov's 24, maybe 25 years old. Ristolainen's 26. Carter Hart, 22. Sanheim's young. Wade Allison. They have a lot of top prospects that are still young, playing in the AHL or other leagues out where. Like the only real selling pieces they have are Couturier and Giroux. Konechny, maybe.
Maybe TK.
He's kind of worked himself out of Philadelphia at this point. I don't think that there's any future for Travis Konechny here in Philadelphia, but
I would concur with that. Concur with that statement.
They just don't have a lot to sell. They're so young. This is kind of something that we should have all expected for some time, and really this should have happened years ago. But James Van Riemsdyk's untradeable because of his contract, so they're going to have to eat that one. Unless they, want to give up another pick just so somebody would take it, kind of like what they did with Gostisbehere. But he's untradeable. He's not going anywhere. The whole team's a mess. Chuck Fletcher has a lot of work to do.
And it's not that I don't think he can get it done. As you pointed out, they're a very young team. They've got a lot of prospects coming up. They could be a playoff contender within the next 18 to 24 months. And I firmly do believe that. But where they sit right now, it's just – especially as a Philadelphia fan, it's just an embarrassment. Like I said, I'm having a hard time watching them. I can't get out of the first period most nights.
Well, neither can they. So, let's move on from that depressing topic because as much as I would love to see him stay, I do believe that he goes. Be a huge piece of Philadelphia history. Moving on. That being said, let's talk about baseball for a little bit. So speaking of big names and free agents, there's a rumor that the Yankees are going to heavily pursue Freddie Freeman in the offseason. The Braves really screwed this one up. And the fact that they didn't lock up their franchise player, you can tell me, Acuna is their franchise player now. However, Freeman's been there a long time and produced for a long time for that franchise. He's still the face of that franchise until, he stops playing at a high level. I think they really screwed this one up, to be honest with you. This is a guy who should have been locked up last April.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Everything I'm reading right now is saying that Freddie Freeman and the Braves are still expected to make an agreement, but obviously there's no ground being made right now with the lockout, which we'll touch on in a few minutes. But I'm with you. It's absurd that for the face of your franchise for the last 9 years, 10 years, Freddie Freeman wasn't immediately locked up. I know you got a lot of young talent on that team. You've got the Austin Rileys and the Ozzy Albies, and as you already pointed out, the Ronald Acuñas, and then you got the Sorokas and the pitchers and everybody, the Friedmans and the Andersons. Like I get it. Your team is young too, Atlanta. I totally understand where you're coming from here. But Freddie Freeman got you to that point where you were a contender. You turn around, you won a World Series, which is phenomenal for you guys. Congratulations. But again, face of your franchise for the last 10 years, and you just I don't know if you just refuse to come to his level, which let's be honest, whatever money he wants at this point in time, he should get from Atlanta. Now, outside of the Atlanta Braves, it does say that the Yankees are expected to take a very heavy run at free agent first baseman Freddie Freeman, and if they cannot land him, which is what this particular article from MLB.com is saying, that they are going to go and try and get Carlos Correa as their offseason big addition.
Yeah, the Yankees have very deep pockets, and they are going to make
for years.
Yeah. Trevor Story, Carlos Correa, there's still some big names out there, a lot of people that didn't sign beforehand. However, I'm curious if those guys are going to be the first players ever to have offers from all 30 teams, with a minimum salary or not minimum salary cap, minimum, salary spending potentially coming. These teams that have very low budgets, they might as well if you're going to spend $30 million, you might as well spend it in one place and somebody who's going to sell tickets for you. So these guys could potentially be the first free agents to ever get offers from all 30 teams.
Yeah, and I mean, we've discussed it in depth about where the Phillies sit and how they should really go get another shortstop, Correa, Story. We've discussed it in detail, so we're not going to go into it here.
I don't think they do.
I thought that months ago, but I don't think they do either. I'm still holding out hope.
That's played really well at every level of the minor leagues, even in the Futures game, even in the Arizona Fall League. He's played very well, even in AAA. So I think they kind of let Gregorius, ride this out one more year and give Stott a little bit more development, and then he's the shortstop of the future, barring any real setbacks.
I mean, it's worth noting, and I know we're like really honing in on Philadelphia sports here, which we try not to do. But the Phillies were 3 games away from making the playoffs against the team that ended up eventually winning the World Series. So they're in a position where if they feel like only one piece is what they need, Aaron Nola is definitely on the board, in my opinion. How could he not be posting a 4.22 ERA this past season? He was horrendous. Now, look, we know he's got big league stuff. 3 years ago, he finished second or third in the Cy Young race in the NL, but they have the potential to make a run and go get pieces that could get them into the playoffs, because as the Braves showed you, just get in. So my opinion is we're in a position, and I don't think, obviously Bryson Stott is not on the board, but we've got other minor league assets who could play at the big league level at some level of success that could also be on the chip. But the biggest name for me that's on the trade block is probably Aaron Nola.
Yeah, he is on the trade block. It's kind of inevitable with the season that he had. However, I don't think the Phillies can really afford to do that. Aaron Nola's at his all-time lowest value. He just had his worst season of his big league career. And like you said, this is a guy we know he has the stuff. He's still in his mid-20s. He's still very young. He's still in a very team-friendly contract. So I don't think that he ends up going anywhere unless the offer is, really good. This is not a team that wants to keep trading pieces to signify a rebuild. This is a team that's going to go out there and make a splash. Justin Verlander comes to mind. However, I don't know that Verlander would bite on a team that's a fringe playoff contender. I think at 38 years old, he'd probably want to go to a team that's more World Series contender. But something like that has to happen for this team. They can't keep trading out pieces, keep constantly trying to rebuild one piece at a time, but also, being a win now team. You went out and signed a guy like Bryce Harper, who's going to bring a win now culture to your team. You might as well build around that instead of just selling out to everybody.
So this is actually one of the free agents that I think the Phillies do land. I'm not going to lie to you. He's really good.
I kind of agree with that.
He's really good friends with Bryce Harper. They played in the same little league high school town out there in Vegas. So I do think that has a lot of sway with the decision that Chris Bryant gets. And I got to be honest, he'd be a perfect replacement for Kutch out there in left field.
Put Bohm back at third
I,
base.
I agree. Give Alec Boehm and his 304 with runners in scoring position average another opportunity to show that he can hit the ball and become a slightly better defender than he's been. But I do in fact think that Chris Bryant goes to the Philadelphia Phillies. And it's got a lot to do with the sway that Bryce Harper and JT Realmuto, those guys have on a franchise.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that he will definitely go to Philadelphia.
Oh no,
However,
not by any means. I'm just saying that I feel like he might.
Yeah, they're definitely a contender for a guy like Chris Bryant, and that would be, super nice, regardless of what they wanted to do with Alec Boehm. Really, if we get a full-time DH, you make Hoskins the DH, you move Bryant or Boehm over to first, whatever the case may be. If that full-time DH coming in would pay serious dividends for the Phillies and what they wanted to do in free agency.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of other free agents out there too. They could always add like a Matt Duffy, a bench piece. Trevor Story, like I said, is still available. Carlos Correa, they could move. Either one of them could move over to third base in reality if they wanted to make a splash like that. But mostly, they need pitching help. They really, really need pitching help. Best on the market right now is actually Clayton Kershaw.
Yeah, that also is interesting to me that the Dodgers didn't just, in good faith re-sign Clayton Kershaw. He's been there forever. I know they've been a good franchise for the longest time, but Kershaw has been there forever, and he's been successful forever. He used to be able to throw 96, 97 and overpower hitters. He learned how to Greg Maddux himself into strikeouts and victories. He still holds a right above 3 ERA career. I would be interested if Clayton Kershaw wanted to let the Phillies kick the tires. I'd be okay with that being an option for the Philadelphia Phillies.
I think the price tag would just be insane again for a fringe contending team. It's not like we're talking about World Series contending. We're talking like fringe playoff. Now, if they could convince a guy like Kershaw to come here and be a 1-2 punch with Zach Wheeler, and then Nola slides into your 3 spot, that's fine. However, the deal would have to be just right because Kershaw is 34 years old and has a history of back problems.
That's true.
The Dodgers really rode him, especially when he was young. For a very long time.
That's why he can't throw 96, 97 anymore.
Yeah, but, at the same time, I think Kershaw has the ability to pitch long enough that he can – I mean, Clayton Kershaw's a Hall of Famer, let's be honest.
Absolutely.
Probably not first ballot because the people who vote on the MLB Hall of Fame, the writers, are absolutely ridiculous, and they were all dropped on their head as children. But
yeah, we can call them idiots. It's okay.
Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous that Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds are not in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I want to touch on that real quick. I don't care about the steroid situation. I know that it may have helped Barry Bonds hit the ball further, but it doesn't help his hand-eye coordination and the quickness of his bat. He was a phenomenal player before steroids, and yeah, maybe the steroids gave him more home runs, but they do not increase your hand-eye. Wow, I stuttered myself there. Hand-eye coordination, and as a result of taking the steroids in that steroid era, just like Roger Clemens, these guys are being left off the list for something that's stupid, in my opinion, considering even though they couldn't prove it on a lot of players, everybody was doing it.
Here's the reality of the situation is the steroid era in baseball, the mid to late 90s, the early 2000s, that was a dark time for the sport as a whole. However,
it revived the sport.
Some of the things that generated from that sport saved baseball. Let's be honest. The Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa home run competition absolutely saved baseball. Baseball was getting dull. It was getting boring at that time, and they absolutely rejuvenated and put life into the sport. All the steroids did for Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds was extend the peaks of their careers. It didn't change the fact that they were arguably the best at their position. Roger Clemens was a 7-time Cy Young Award winner, 6 of which you could probably guess that he didn't do without steroids. Barry Bonds was going to be a 500 homer, 5-tool player, regardless of what happened, after late in his career. Yes, it was obvious he took steroids. However, steroids were not against the rules at the time. It was an unwritten rule that you should not be cheating. It's kind of like the pine tar thing with pitchers now. Batters and pitchers understand that the pitchers are going to use pine tar. It's those weird substances that start, getting a little the spider tax. That's the type of stuff they don't like. But there's so many unwritten rules in baseball that people have to follow, like you threw at one of my best guys, I'm going to throw back at you. Steroids were not illegal by any stretch of the imagination. And Bud Selig, who's you could argue maybe worse than Rob Manfred, probably not, but Bud Selig was pretty bad commissioner, did nothing about it. He had all the evidence against Barry Bonds and other guys like that, and didn't do anything about it. He didn't make steroids illegal. They spend millions of dollars as an organization to go to trials and whatnot. All in the meantime, while Bud Selig was just sitting on this information, and he let these guys go about it. So
yeah,
I mean, if my boss is going to let me get away with cheating and doing crap at work too, guess what I'm going to do? It's basic math. Like, we're human beings. Let's be honest, guys. Like, they didn't do anything illegal at the time, and they were both fantastic ball players with the peaks of their careers, dominated their positions, and they should be in the Hall of Fame. I think that's what growing up is all about. You're in high school and you're playing ball and you think about, oh, these guys are cheaters. I would never do that. And then you grow up and you're like, yeah, these guys were great players anyway. Let's get over it.
Yeah, and that's absolutely where I'm at. Fortunately, Roger Clemens made a statement. Him and his family have moved past the Hall of Fame thing, but you can't tell me it doesn't eat at him. Like, you just can't. It's ridiculous that he doesn't make the Hall of Fame.
The player committee in 5 years is going to vote both of those guys in. It's just a disgrace, though.
It should never have come to that. Barry Bonds has the all-time home run record. He has the single-season home run record. He again hit over 300 for a large part of his entire career. He averaged over 300. There was a season where he walked 218 times because teams just did not want to pitch to him. Again, probably steroid related. But
if you turned all of Barry Bonds' 762 home runs into outs, his career on base percentage is 384.
Yeah, you're talking 756 hits that go away, and he's still 384. Like, there's no reason this guy should not be in the Hall of Fame. Clemens, a career, what was he? A career 2.92 ERA. Like
7 Cy Young awards. Who else has them?
Exactly. It should have been no question.
By the same writers that vote the people into the Hall of Fame, Roger Clemens was voted the best pitcher in the league 7 times.
It's amazing.
Barry Bonds, by the Baseball Writers of America, who vote people into the Hall of Fame, was just made the 8th best player of all time on ESPN's top 100 list, but he's not in the Hall of Fame.
It's blasphemous. It's an atrocity. Big words here, but that's what it is. And it really is. As baseball fans, you look at this and you're 97, 94, 95, when the sport was going away and the sport was dying. It's starting to make a lot of sense now that I'm older. Like, we went through a really good time after the Sosa McGuire situation where baseball was great again, and baseball was great again. And we're starting to see it where it's
Rob
going away.
Screwing it all up again. But
that's right.
Yeah, that's
I do want to touch on this.
Yeah,
I do want to touch on this.
The reason he is not in the Hall of Fame is strictly political. That's it.
100%.
Curt Schilling is one of the best postseason pitchers of all time. Very good regular season
Bloody sock.
He's pretty much like Madison Bumgarner is nowadays. You look at Madison Bumgarner's regular season stats outside of when he was with Arizona, and it's like, this guy's a decent pitcher. He's pretty good. You look at the postseason stats, otherworldly. That's basically what Curt Schilling was. And the fact that he just can't shut up, and the fact that he's super openly political, and he has a right to be that way, has screwed him out of the Hall of Fame.
And it's ridiculous that being openly political and not being able to shut your mouth affects the way that your career went. Like, why? Why does it do that?
And I'm not saying I agree with any of his stances. Quite frankly, I can't even remember what he said off the top of my head.
Same here. I don't care about what he said. I'm saying that based on his career, he should absolutely 100% be in the Hall of Fame.
Based on what he did between the lines, it should be in the Hall of Fame.
Yes.
Another former Philly that should be in the Hall of Fame and probably will be next year, Scott Rowland. Third base is terribly underrepresented in the Hall of Fame. Unless you're Brooks Robinson or Mike Schmidt, you generally don't get a lot of votes. The next clear-cut third baseman that's going to go into the Hall of Fame is probably Nolan Arenado, and he's still playing. So that should tell you everything you need to know about that. They need to, soften up the standards for third baseman a little bit and realize that Rowland was a good, not great hitter, but he played lights-out defense
for his entire career.
Yeah,
for his entire career, he was lights out.
Even in his mid-late 30s when he was, on the tail end with the Cardinals, he was not moved to some bench role. He was out there playing the hot corner because his hands were still ridiculous in his mid-30s.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the 1 year he spent with one of the years he spent with the Reds, he was only hitting like 212. He's batting like 7th in the lineup, but he's out there every single day.
Yeah, and the Pete Rose thing, that's another disgrace. Bud Selig had an axe to grind with Pete Rose, and that's why he's not in the Hall of Fame.
Charlie Hustle himself.
He might be he probably is the hardest working baseball player ever.
Yeah, I mean, last week we talked about Tom Brady being the GOAT of and you brought this up. And it was a great point. And I loved your take on it. Tom Brady being the best competitor, the GOAT competitor. And I got to be honest with you, looking back on it, Pete Rose is probably in that category as well. What he brought to we're younger than having been able to see Pete Rose. We've only seen videos and like flashbacks and stuff on it. But what he brought to the game every single day was on the same level as Brady in football. And I stand by that comment.
All right, so Big Papi gets in even with his steroid allegations. Where do we see Alex Rodriguez? First ballot?
No, again, he had the whole he tried to deny it situation, and then it was proven.
Admitted to it later in his career. Oh, I did it in Seattle, but I didn't do it anywhere else.
Correct. You weren't doing it in Texas, and you definitely didn't do it in New York. Get out of here.
I think the A-Rod situation is a little different, though. You look at Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens; these guys obviously use steroids at the back end of their career to extend their peaks.
A-Rod did it his
when he was
whole
19.
Career. Yeah.
How good was he actually?
When A-Rod came up, he was a stick. He was skinny. And then by the time he retired, he was just
That's why he moved from shortstop to third base, was because he just didn't have he had the build of a third baseman by the time the middle of his career came. That and he signed with the Yankees, so Derek Jeter, that has something to do with it. But
no, he was playing third base in Texas after the first year of his contract. They moved him to third. Did
they? I thought they moved Michael Young to third.
No, they had Michael Young after the trade for A-Rod out of Texas.
Did they? Oh, I must have my timelines mixed up. Michael Young was a good hitter too.
I agree. Phillies had him for half a season.
Yeah. And he hit 300.
He did indeed. He hit 300.
He hit 300 everywhere else.
I do have some information on the lockout. On Thursday afternoon, the MLB made a request to have a neutral negotiator for the negotiations, obviously from the MLBPA and the MLB Owners Association, and the MLBPA denied it.
So that says that screams volumes. But which direction do you think it goes? The lockout is going to end soon, or the lockout is just going to drag on?
So you said that before we got on that the lockout could potentially end within two.
I saw a report. Two reports the same day. One of them said the lockout could end as early as 2 weeks. The other one said there's no end in sight for the lockout. Which one do you believe is more true, especially after hearing the MLBPA denied a mediator?
Because they denied the mediator, I think probably not 2 weeks, but within a month and a half, I think this is settled. The MLBPA doesn't want to spend a season where players aren't getting paid. End of story. They're going to want them out on the field. They're going to try and get for some sort of spring training availability, which obviously Ryan and I are hoping for because we want to, go to games and be media outlets there. So we're hoping for spring training too, just so everybody's aware. But because the MLBPA is listening to the players and they're saying, we're not going to get paid if this isn't over, like you need to figure something out. I think it'll probably be handled mid-March. And then we'll have like 3 weeks of spring training, and then the season will start on not on time, but like a week or two late. And that's what I think is going to happen.
Yeah. So I mean, there wasn't too much information revealed as to why the MLBPA denied it, but I think
none actually. The only comment that's been made is by the MLB Owners Association.
Yeah. So I think first off, I think the MLB Owners Association reaching out for a mediator it's not a good sign. I think it means that these two sides are very far apart and that there's really no budging going on. I think that this means this is going to drag out a little bit, like kind of where you're at. However, I think the MLBPA, by denying it, means they're willing to budge a little bit, like down the line. They're willing to play a little bit of ball. They probably realize they're asking for a lot and realistically aren't going to get it. However, that's surprising to me because if you look at the first 100 years of baseball or so, the owners could do whatever they wanted. They were greedy. They, look at the Black Sox scandal. That all stemmed from the fact that the owner wouldn't pay his guys bonuses or really even livable wages.
For those of you who don't know, historically, the White Sox thing had shoeless Joe Jackson. It's pretty much what the entire movie Field of Dreams is based on. Sorry, continue.
It's 8 Men Out.
Sorry?
8 Men Out is the movie that you're thinking of.
Oh, man, I'm sorry. You're right. It is 8 Men Out. I'm sorry.
It's actually one of my favorite movies of all time. But notoriously, the MLB owners are probably the greediest in all of sports. They've had the most leeway for years. So recently, if you look at a lot of the collective bargaining agreements, they kind of side towards the players, kind of as like a reparations type of thing. Hey, we wouldn't even let you choose what team you wanted to go to for the first 106 years. So let's give a little. So it does surprise me a little that the MLBPA would give in this early, but I think that I think both sides kind of realize that they are very far apart and they're going to do whatever they feel is necessary to avoid an extended lockout, which you and I both predicted is what we were looking at from the get-go. So that, I think the fact that both sides kind of did this, it did whatever they did in their own best interest, means we're a little bit closer than what we initially thought. However, 2 weeks is blasphemous. I don't think that there's any kind of decision that's going to be made within the next 2 weeks, because I don't think the Owners Association would have even asked for a mediator if it was going to be 2 weeks.
Yeah, and that's where I'm at. Is it definitely won't be in 2 weeks. So as early as is just the media trying to stir up rumors and stuff and try and gain some traction for themselves. But I absolutely agree. It won't be within the next 2 weeks. Like I said, I'm predicting probably the next 6 to 8 weeks we get something. They figure out something, get something done, and then a hurried spring training, and then we'll see a lot of injuries the first couple weeks of the season. But we'll have baseball.
I don't know about the injuries thing. These guys have so many, like all these guys have private trainers and they're all working out still, just because they're not at team facilities doesn't mean they don't have batting cages in their backyard or in their basement. Yeah, so I'm kind of torn on what this means for baseball. It could be a good thing. Could be a really good thing. Could be the MLBPA saying, "No, we're closer than what you guys think we are." It could be the owners saying, "No, we're further than you guys think we are." So there's really, without any information, I'm assuming we'll see something else probably in the next week or so that would give us a little bit more of a tell. I would like to just go line by line and figure out an agreement, based on minimum payroll, permanent DH, salaries, things like that, season length, postseason teams. There's a lot to discuss in this collective bargaining agreement. And I think it's a long time coming. I think they've been putting Band-Aids over bullet holes for years. And then this is kind of, the final straw. The players are like, we want these changes, or at least some of them.
Yeah, and look, I'm looking at it from a fan base situation, but also I want to take the angle of the players for the fan base. And the reason I'm saying that is there are teams who sign players to huge contracts, and now one of these seasons are potentially in jeopardy, and that doesn't change the contract. The guys still owed the money. The guys' years end at the same year. So for
Captain.
Let me post that real quick. We'll go back to hockey super fast. Claude Giroux, who we just said was still a very good player, was just named the All-Star of the MVP of the All-Star game.
Flyers suck.
Flyers suck. That's right. But yeah, so the Braves just signed Acuna to a huge deal. Obbies to a pretty big deal. The Phillies have Harper on a huge deal.
The Braves got Acuna really cheap.
They did, but really my point stands is these guys are on contracts, and the contract still ends on the same year that they signed it for. Just because we're not playing this season or for whatever reason, it doesn't make the contract go away. So from the MLB's Players Association, they need to really be thinking about this. There's stuff in play, and people are not going to get paid. And I think that's probably, to your point, why they denied a mediator, strictly because they're like, okay, look, we didn't really want to deny the mediator, but we're closer than you think we are. We need to keep talking. You need to come to us just a little bit, and then we'll be good. So I think it does speak volumes to your point. So that's where we're at.
Yeah, it's a really difficult situation. They're being really, really scarce with the information they bring out. I think that's why that report came out that they're, within 2 weeks. I don't think anybody actually believes that. I think that was just a bait report to get somebody to say something, somebody who's inside the situation go, no, that's not true. And then they can report on the fact that, oh, they said this isn't true. This is the player representative for the Minnesota Twins, something like that. So I think that was a bait report. In all honesty, I don't think we're anywhere within 2 weeks of seeing an end to this lockout.
Yeah, I gotcha. Let's move to football. You want to move to football? Okay.
Let's move to
just so everybody knows, our block pool is almost full. We will square everything away by the end of the week and have all the forms out. I know the name of the show is block pool, but stuff happens.
And we talked about the block pool. We held up our end of the bargain.
Yeah, we'll get all the information to you guys as soon as possible.
So next week when we do our show, we'll probably put the numbers up, publicly for everybody to see.
Yeah. So outside of that,
by the way, just want to announce that Bill and I are not in this block pool. We actually don't own any squares in our own block pool. So if you think we're going to cheat, that's wrong.
Yes. Yeah, our name is not on any of them. We stayed true to ourselves. We talked about it before we decided to run the block pool, that we didn't want to have to buy any squares. And fortunately, thanks to you guys, our fans, and everybody who I work with and Ryan works with, we got this thing filled up. Yeah, like I said, we'll get it all squared away. We'll have it ready to run by next Friday. And then obviously for the Super Bowl, I don't know if Ryan will be able to, but I will be coming on in between quarters to tell you who the winner is. It'll be very fast, few minutes, and then I'll get off because I'm trying to enjoy the Super Bowl as well. And yeah, that's how we'll do that. Moving forward from the block pool, we have the Super Bowl next Sunday, 6 p.m.
Let's talk about the conference championship.
Yes, that's what I want to talk about.
Whew. Man, these playoffs have been the best playoffs that I remember in quite some time. I mean, even the year the Eagles won the Super Bowl, it was awesome to see them win every game. They blew out the Vikings. That wasn't a good game. Like game for game, like this has got to be one of the most fan-friendly playoffs, and it ends with two quarterbacks that are really unhateable. That are
Joe Burrow, Matt Stafford,
end up in the Super Bowl together. So, it's only the second time that two number one overall picks in the draft have played against each other in the Super Bowl.
Yeah. So conference championship games. Let's go with the first one. You had the first game was the
AFC one, the Bengals.
The Cincinnati Bengals visiting the Kansas City Chiefs.
And I told you that there was no way the Bengals were going to win that game. And in the first half, it sure as hell looked like it.
Yeah, so for what it's worth, I went back and I didn't go back and forth. I was confident the Chiefs were going to win. But for some reason, I had this string pulling on me that said, you know what, the Bengals could probably pull this out. And I don't know if for sure I was going to say it on the podcast last week, but you looked at the screen and you said there's no way. And I went with my 100%. I agree with you. It was like, you know what? He's right. There's no way the Bengals are going to win. And as to your point, 21-3 in the first half, but the Bengals got it done. They can't protect Joe Burrow, but he found ways to create space by himself. He found ways to make Jamar Chase be open. He found ways to get Joe Mixon going. And really, Zach Taylor put the entire game on Joe Burrow's shoulders, and he said, I got you. We're champs. Let's go. And again, another walk-off field goal for Evan McPherson.
Guy stone cold, ice in his veins.
I hope he went over to Joe Burrow before he kicked in and said, well, we're going to the Super Bowl, because that would have been awesome.
Yeah, repeat of the divisional round. But, I really was convinced that the Bengals just weren't ready. And in the first half, they really weren't. They really were not. Patrick Mahomes looked terrible in the second half. Completed 2 passes or something. I think he threw 2 interceptions as well. It was night and day.
Yeah. So the overtime. There's still the debate whether the coin toss should decide overtime or not, and the Bengals came out and proved why the coin toss shouldn't decide overtime. How do you feel about it now?
The same.
So do I. I didn't change my opinion. It's great that the Bengals made a stop, but Tyreek Hill needs to catch that ball and hit him right in the hands.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That being said, one play does not a season make. The Chiefs are still in dynasty mode. They'll still compete next year. They're not really worried about it. However, that was bad. Also, I'm just really happy that I don't have to see Brittany Matthews and Jackson Mahomes all over my social media feed. They're probably 2 of the most annoying people I've never met, actually, in my entire life in the world. And that's what I'll leave at that. However, so we are all blessed for that. Thank you, Joe Burrow. Thank you, Evan McPherson. Thank you, Zach Taylor. You saved my social media feed.
Yeah, listen, for what it's worth, I said this on the show last week. I really wanted some new teams. I was so desperate for some new teams. I didn't want to see Tom Brady again. I didn't want to see the Chiefs again. I wanted new teams. And I know the Rams were there 3 years ago, whatever it was. And the Niners were even there 4 years ago or 3 years ago, whatever that was as well. But they're still not repetitive teams going every year. And I really wanted to see that. I wanted to see the Bengals versus the Rams or the Niners. And I am happy with the matchup that we have in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, no, I'm totally okay with it. Like I said, two very unhateable quarterbacks.
Joe Burrow,
Matthew Stafford suffered in Detroit for a long time, and unlike Calvin Johnson and unlike Barry Sanders, they made the move to trade him. Excellent move, Detroit front office. Excellent move, Los Angeles front office on acquiring him, because that was the missing piece. If you analyze that team with Jared Goff, they're 10-7. They're like a wild card team, and they maybe win a playoff game.
Maybe win, but they don't go to
trade. They were a Super Bowl contender. They got a quarterback who we knew had all the talent in the world, surrounded by a talentless team.
Yeah, and we discussed this before the season began, that we thought the Rams had become contenders for the Super Bowl, and they proved us right.
Yeah, and they looked iffy at times. They lost 3 straight games in the regular season, but regular season and playoffs are 2 different animals. All you got to do is get there.
That's right. I said it earlier. All you got to do is get in. Second game was, obviously, we've already mentioned it a little bit. Stafford and the Rams took on the Garoppolo-led Niners. And for a decent portion of the game, the Rams didn't look phenomenal, but still turn around and get the victory on a walk-off field goal by Matt Gay. 6 straight last-second points scored playoff games this year. It's just phenomenal. As a football fan, I love watching these games. Yeah, to your point from earlier, like, it's the best year of playoffs that has been seen since I can remember. Yeah, since I can remember.
Yeah, so this is an interesting situation going on in San Francisco, because it was assumed that Garoppolo was going to play this year, Lance was going to learn behind him, and then Lance was going to take over next year. That seems to be the case now. However, it's going to be an interesting precedent, given the way that the quarterback position is valued around the NFL, around the fan bases and whatnot, that the 49ers get within a field goal of going to the Super Bowl, and then they move on from Jimmy Garoppolo. Do I think it's the right move? Yes. Jimmy Garoppolo is not a game changer. I don't care what anybody says. The fact that Jimmy Garoppolo-led teams are 2-0 over Aaron Rodgers-led Packers teams shows you how unimportant the quarterback position actually is. Nobody in their right mind actually thinks Jimmy Garoppolo is better than Aaron Rodgers. But I think in terms of the way Kyle Shanahan wants to run his offense, the young, explosive, power arm, good with his legs, Trey Lance is the better option than Jimmy Garoppolo. I think that team becomes 10 times better. They stop, relying on their defense and their running game so much. They become just 10 times better of an offense, 10 times more explosive. They almost become like the Bengals in a way. If you look at Trey Lance, he brings a boomer bust aspect to the 49ers offense that Jimmy Garoppolo just doesn't have. And there's rumors that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to go to New York. I've heard Carolina. It sounds like John Lynch has sat down and talked to Jimmy Garoppolo, and they kind of, because of how far they got, they want to do their due diligence and see where he wants to go. And it sounds like wherever he wants to go, they will make a conscious effort to move him to that team.
Yeah, I mean, and if we're looking at the teams that have potential to be playoff teams that are available looking for a quarterback right now, Denver's got to be an enticing area. I know we keep talking about Aaron Rodgers going there. Seattle, or New Orleans has got to be an enticing area. If Russell Wilson,
think so. I think New Orleans is out. John Payton.
Oh yeah, we didn't even mention. Oh no, we mentioned
John Payton. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I don't know about that one. $73 million over the cap currently. New Orleans is.
That's fair. Carolina, I'm not sure, are really on the cusp of being a playoff team, but now with Tom Brady not in the conference anymore, who knows? Tampa Bay is a team that is a playoff team that could potentially use a quarterback similar to Jimmy Garoppolo.
I've heard Tampa. I've heard Denver. I've also heard Washington, which actually would be an interesting fit. Washington Commanders. I'm never calling them that. That's outside of right now. I'm not calling them that. That's a terrible team.
How does Commanders get through your entire list of names, and then
that sounds like
you literally nicknamed your team the Commies, the Washington Commies? Like, what are you thinking?
It sounds like one of those like year 8 Madden franchise teams that decided to relocate. Like the computer does a relocation and gives them just some really crappy name. Yeah, that's what that sounds like. It was terrible. An awful choice.
Anyway. getting past that, we got some information about the NFL too, but we'll get to that on another show. I don't want to do predictions this week. We'll do predictions
we're doing
next week.
We're doing
Yeah.
strictly Super Bowl next weekend.
Correct. So having said that, I think that does it for us today. All right.
Yeah, lot of interesting moving pieces going on in the MLB as well as the NFL in terms of players. Trade deadline for hockey coming up, so stay tuned. We might be active on the social medias, posting some news and giving some thoughts and opinions about it throughout the week.
Yeah, so please comment. We like to talk back. Real quick information. The NFL is obviously being sued by Brian Flores for racial discrimination. John Elway
came out and made a statement about that today.
Yeah, but it was a very lawyer-esque response.
It was they've done so much better, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. We're doing our due diligence to look into the allegations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. John Elway came out and defended himself, said he was on a flight until 3 a.m., tried to do the interview. He thought he gave Brian Flores his due diligence, et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, it's something to watch. It's definitely something to watch.
Yeah.
Brian Flores was the front runner to be the Texans head coach, and he warned them ahead of time that he was writing this letter and he was suing the NFL.
And they still interviewed him.
Yeah, twice. They interviewed him twice. Yeah. Doug Peterson's hired as the Jaguars head coach. I think that's a really good move for Doug Peterson. I know they're a couple of years out from competing, but they have a good running attack in Travis Etienne and James Robinson. Trevor Lawrence is not as bad as Urban Meyer made him look. We've said that every week on the show since he was drafted. That's a team that Doug Peterson may be able to turn around into a playoff contender. He probably doesn't win a Super Bowl there.
But if he makes them a playoff contender, that's a big win.
I concur there. But outside of that, there's not a whole lot of other information outside of the Super Bowl next week. So like I said before, Ryan, you want to take us out?
Yeah, you pretty much covered all the closing remarks. And like I touched on, Sean Payton, no longer the coach of the New Orleans Saints. There's speculation that he could go to the Cowboys. There's speculation he'll be in the booth. I think we talked about last week. So
the booth, yeah.
Yeah, that's all I have for us this week. Thanks for coming out, guys. We really appreciate the feedback, the support, the comments, the shares, the likes, any reaction, any sharing. We still have our T-shirts for sale, custom or, just a generic BSing Sports T-shirt. Any amount of support you guys give us, we appreciate. And we will see you guys next weekend for a Super Bowl preview.
All right. Have a good week. Thanks. Or wait, hold on. What was my sign out? Thanks for joining us for a little BS and a whole lot of sports.
Yeah, a little BS, whole lot of sports.